Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Independence Public Library's Science Time. As always, I am part-time scientist Mr. Alex, and today, on this cold winter's day, I thought it would be really cool for us to work on a cool experiment that I like to call snowflake crystals. And what we're going to do is we are going to grow real crystals on our paper snowflakes. If you've ever, during the winter months, taken a piece of paper and cut it out into the shape of a snowflake, you know how fun it can be to design and create your own snowflake. You know what they say about a snowflake, no two are the same. And with that, it's really cool to express yourself by making your own unique designs. But what if, after creating your own unique paper snowflake, you could grow real crystals on there to look very similar to actual snow or ice and have it shine just like on a snowy day? That's exactly what we're going to do today. And all we're going to need are pieces of paper, scissors to cut, salt, which we're going to use to grow the crystals onto our snowflake, and some hot water that we can all put this into in either a bowl, like I'm going to use right here, or a shallow plate actually works a little bit better if you have one on hand. So, with that, let's get started. The first part, let's cut ourselves our very own snowflake. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to make our snowflake that we can use to grow the salt crystals on top of it. I recommend, if possible, using a colored piece of paper like this so that the salt crystals will show up even better than they would on a white piece of paper. I'm using a light blue because I think that fits the winter season and it just looks pretty cool in my opinion. So what we're going to do is taking our standard 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, we're going to take this corner up in the top right, we're going to fold that back down here until it reaches the other edge. And then once we line up the edge together, just like that, we're going to crease it. Crease it very firmly. Perfect. And once we have that part folded, we're going to take our handy dandy scissors and we're going to cut off this extra piece of paper that didn't get folded. Perfect. We can now take this and recycle it. Okay, but now we are left here with a triangle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our triangle and we're going to fold it in half. Just like this. Line up the edges just like before and then crease and crease, crease. Get it as nice and flat as possible. Okay, and now that we've got this triangle, we're not going to fold it in half, we're going to fold it about into thirds. And this is pretty difficult, so take some time with this and try to make sure you get the fold just right. It's going to look a little something like this. If you take this bottom corner, take it this way. And like I said, this is a fairly difficult one to get right off the bat. Be careful, it should look kind of like this. With this bottom corner to the right of the middle. Crease it, and then what you're going to do is you're going to do the same thing but to the opposite direction with this corner. And you're going to fold right back over. And if you folded it correctly the first time, it should line up just like this. Crease it all again, make sure it's really nice and as flat as possible. And then you're left with this really cool looking shape. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut off this part, just like this, and leave us again with another triangle. Now this is what we're going to use to make the snowflake. If we unfold this now, you can see this is going to be the template for our snowflake. So any of the cuts that we make to that triangle will affect all the parts of this. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of freestyle a bit and see what I get. And I recommend that you have some fun in trying to figure out what you're going to make your snowflake look like. You just have to make sure that this creased edge has some bits that are still there. And remember that this flat part right here is where the ends of the snowflake are going to be. So I think I'm going to make a cut like right maybe here. Then I'm going to connect to that from this corner over here. And as always, remember when you're cutting, especially at this part where you might be really excited about the design you're making, make sure that you're careful when you're cutting and that you don't cut yourself. If you don't feel comfortable with scissors, always ask a helpful adult to cut for you. It's still on a little bit. Oh. There we go. Push that to the side. And maybe one little bit more. Just to see how it looks. Okay, push that all to the side. Now let's unfold our paper and see how our snowflake looks. Ooh, I think that looks pretty cool. I think I'm going to use that one. Although, if you ever want to, once you've done this, if you see that you want to add a little bit more or cut a bit more, you can always fold it back up and make some more cuts. But I think that looks amazing as a snowflake. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to use this to grow my salt crystals on it. Okay, now that we've got our completed snowflake designed the way that we like it, we're going to put it in either our big bowl or our shallow plate, and then we're going to heat up some warm water with salt in it. So what you're going to do is take several teaspoons or tablespoons of salt, put it into a cup, and then you're going to heat water and pour it into the cup to dissolve it. Now, you're probably going to want a helpful adult to work with you with this. You can get it on the stove, you can microwave the water. I got this out of an electric tea kettle, which was perfect. You just want to be careful because hot water can scald you. And this doesn't have to be boiling, but it still has to be pretty hot. And you put it in there and mix it with the salt as warm as you can get it to get as much salt saturated into the water as possible. The warmer the water is, the more salt it can hold. And we do it to the point of super saturation, which is where it can hold more than it normally can because of the heat that we give into it. So stir it, stir it, stir it. Now we're going to pour it over our snowflake. And you're going to want as little water as possible. You just want it to barely cover the snowflake. Oh, there's some that's still stuck in there. Perfect. Doesn't need all that much water to cover our snowflake. In fact, you might not even be able to see it at that angle. Swish it all around and try to make sure that the snowflake is submerged, but just barely. And with that, that warm, salty water covering our snowflake, but just barely in either our shallow plate or this bowl, we're going to let it sit for a while and let the salt crystals grow. And it's going to take a couple of days. The more salt you have, the hotter the liquid, and the least amount of water you use will make the crystals grow faster. But be patient, it's going to take some time. So let's check back in here in a couple of days and see how our snowflake looks. So it's been about 2 days since we set aside our snowflake to sit in our saltwater solution. And as you can see, since then, it's grown this shallow layer of cubic salt crystals. And it looks really cool. If you rotate it around, it sparkles and it shines. It almost looks like a light layer of snow has connected and formed on top of our paper snowflake. It's honestly beautiful. So let's talk about why it did that though. So if we think about the salt water that we had, water in general can only hold a certain amount of any kind of thing that will dissolve in the water. It can only hold a certain amount of salt. But if we raise the water's temperature, it allows it to dissolve more. So if we, at room temperature, dissolved all the water until it's full, we say that's saturated. The water is saturated. It can't hold any more salt. If we pour more salt into the water and stir it around, it'll just pile up at the bottom. But heating it up allows us to put more salt and mix it into the water. And that's what we did. That's why we needed hot water. And we mixed as much salt as we could into that hot water. It was saturated at the high temperature. But when the water's temperature went down and returned to normal, so too did the amount of salt that could fit in it. So we said it was super saturated. And I mentioned that before. It's super saturated because it has more salt than it possibly can. More than saturated, more than full. And of course, it can't just get rid of the salt. It has to put it somewhere. And where it decided to put it was, of course, either our plate or bowl, or it had to put it on our snowflake, and that's exactly what happened. So it deposited the salt that it couldn't hold itself all around, including on the snowflake, and then the salt just kept piling on and making these really cool square-like crystals. How cool is that? And that's one way that you can grow crystals, is when a substance like water has got too much of something like salt or sugar and has to deposit them somewhere, so it makes crystals wherever it can. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed this winter-themed science experiment and you got hopefully something beautiful out of it that you can use to decorate. If there's any water left over, most of mine evaporated, but if there's any water left over in yours, take a paper towel or anything else and dab around the sides of your snowflake to try and, drain some of it up. And then put the snowflake somewhere safe where it can fully dry, and then you can take it out and decorate it anywhere that you want around your house. So thank you guys for joining me for this science time, and I hope that you will stick around for more great activities here at the Independence Public Library. As always, I'm part-time scientist Mr. Alex, and I hope that you have a wonderful winter season. Bye-bye.